again, today marks, a quick turnaround after the season, but it marks the start of what becomes roster transformation from 2024 to 2025. And obviously it's a small high school class for us. That's intentional, both because, we have a full roster currently, and we're going to need to make some room, but also we're going to have a lot of work over the next few weeks as the transfer portal opens too. And this is also part of our shift here internally, where we're taking an approach that blends both developmental high school recruiting and finding guys that fit who we are and that have collegiate experience and snap experience that help us get better more immediately. So a lot to celebrate today. Feel really good about the fact that with bowl prep we'll have early enrollees that'll be able to join in with us and have some practices, and excited to have a team in the weight room right now training to prepare for the bowl game. So a lot to like about today, but also, like I said, kind of the start of what will be really a month-long transformation of our roster that likely will remain some work to do left in the spring, but no different than what we did a year ago.
Are there any other early enrollees other than Vanderbilt, Hinton, Georgia Corey, and Carson Lawrence? And could any of the early enrollees play in the bowl game?
Caden Daniels is also an early enrollee, and they can practice, not play.
How much does Jack Elliott remind you of one Diego?
Well, a lot. He's scrappy, fast, physical, chip on the shoulder player that really fits our system. His coach, Jordan Lynch, was a great player in his own right, and has connections obviously with Coach Kill, and I think it was that call that really got us moving on Jack, and I think it always works out better when you have those types of connections and people that kind of know who you are and you have trust built already. But when Jordan stood on the table for him, we were excited to take him in, and obviously think he's got a great future ahead and really fits our system well. So certainly some physical similarities, some mentality similarities, and hopefully he's able to come in and do the things that Diego's helped us do on the field.
How much similarity is between what he runs and what you guys run?
There's carryover. I think the systems are, have parts and pieces that will make it seamless, because, this has been a little bit of that offensive system that's been around and Jordan would know well, but there's going to be some learning too for Jack, and that's inevitable. But certainly there's enough carryover there. He's going to feel comfortable stepping in and running the offense. He's going to have to know language and, again, some of the system adjustments that we have, but on the whole, he's going to be comfortable in it.
How were you guys able to stave off competition to flip Carson Lawrence and keep him for such a long time, given that he is a very high caliber player?
Well, it comes down to relationships, and obviously he over the course of his recruitment, commitment, and then everything from then on, he's had plenty of suitors, and we've always been consistent in the vision we have for his success here. We've always been consistent in the relationships. Obviously with this class too, I think to point out that, a lot of the work done in these recruiting classes is now done in the spring. And so you're closing, a number of these guys in the summer, and you're coming off a 2-10 season, so it's interesting how there's a lag effect to the success of a season. It didn't used to be this way, right? It used to be you recruit off the year that you just had, you'd sign in February, and this would be about a kind of a 2-month push. I think we're going to really benefit from the progress we've made here internally as we shift to our next class that will be pushing towards summer signing. But ultimately, Carson is a guy that always felt like there was a great vision, always felt like there was connection. And I think as we kind of showed this season the progress, I think that was also helpful in our efforts to say this is exactly where you need to be, and this is only the beginning. And he's all in on that, and we're excited to have him.
Clark, Paul's from the Tennessee. It's
Hey,
good
Paul.
to finally meet you.
Yeah.
Talk on the phone. Funny enough, I covered Jordan Lynch when he played for Mount Carmel.
Okay.
Way back when.
Very good.
But just curious, your thoughts as a coach, this transition with NIL, with the transfer portal, how has that changed your perspective for high school recruiting? I mean, it used to just be that's what you guys did all the time. How has that transition been for you, and how much of an adjustment? You had to make it quickly, obviously, for the last few years, but how have you done that?
Well, I mean, we've I guess.
It's a loaded question.
No, it's good. There's just been a shift in our strategy, and that shift has represented what we feel like best positions our team, and it really has kind of turned the original blueprint on its head for us, and it's interesting, and we process this as we're moving through it, because just like we all know, coaching in college is like running on a treadmill every day. It's never this, you don't have time to step back and get big picture. So you're constantly just trying to make those course adjustments as the calendar goes. There are different ways to build a team in 2025. And I think there are some schools that can still take a model where they're recruiting high school players kind of exclusively and just really adding select pieces in the portal. We need to have the blended approach to account for some of the gaps on our roster, and then it speeds up your ability to be competitive. But we don't want to lose the high school recruiting piece. And so how do we just balance the two? Right now, in this one, we're going to be probably a little more portal heavy than we were, high school recruiting heavy. And I think coming off a successful season and stacking another really good year, you may see that shift, but it's always going to be a slider for us. And a lot of that has to do with what are the needs on our roster that we need to address, and where is the best place from which we can address those. And there aren't a lot of high school offensive linemen that are just ready to play, at least not in the pool that, we're, a lot of times that's a developmental year, 2-year position where you're growing them up in your system and getting them bigger physically and prepared mentally. So, when you look at where we need to add and where we need to bolster, there's reasons to emphasize the portal for us this time around. Again, next year could be different, and we just got to keep kind of examining where the needs are, what we feel like the best pool from which to pull those players from, and take a targeted approach that way.
I think a lot has to do with players you don't know you're not expecting to lose too. That kind of plays into that as well.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I'm still trying to. I think our systems have adjusted to some of that. Emotionally, haven't adjusted all the way, and so these weeks become hard. They're taxing, and I think this is the common refrain. And again, I don't. There's nothing wrong with where we are as a game. It is challenging, and I think it's chaotic right now. And over time, there will be some sort of order restored. And that order will be the best possible version of this kind of new NIL, revenue sharing model of college athletics. But, planning on retention, trying to set the course for understanding where the players are and where we are. I mean, when you really look at it, again, going back to, hey, where do you got to look at where you invest your money in a roster too. And so, again, what is the market in high school recruiting? What does that look like? What is the amount of risk you're willing to take with the money invested? Because you don't have an opportunity to move those numbers as the year goes. It's complex, and it's imperfect, but we learned a lot going through this last year that has made us better prepared for this moment. We also gained confidence with the ability to find guys that fit our environment, our culture, and also helped elevate the play on the field in the portal. And so, that's kind of the ground that we're standing on now to set a course for this roster to improve, because we can't, look, however many times I've said, the goal is not bowl eligibility. I mean, we're trying to elevate, and to elevate, you have to consistently and continuously reimagine, the approach, and also elevate the roster. That's kind of a big picture, explanation of what we're looking at and how we're doing it and why.
On the offensive line, I mean, you guys were trying to recruit some high school linemen, but didn't get them, and then none of the starters this year were recruited by your staff. Does there need to be a reevaluation of how you guys both actually recruit offensive linemen, as well as, or I guess, the evaluation process for offense?
Well, I think we're constantly scrutinizing that. And I mean, this goes back to hard conversations in the summertime around the recruiting of offensive linemen. We've also had a change in systems here and a change in offensive line coach that I think, with the offensive staff in general, I think they're just, they're a little further behind, because the first thing you do when you take a new job is you got to recruit the team that you have. You teach systems. You try to embed those. We've spent so much time and energy on this season doing the best we can to position our team for success that, it takes a real narrow focus to accomplish that. And so, I would imagine, again, as we understand what Tim Beck is looking for, what Chris Klanakis is looking for, as our evaluation systems are set up to kind of channel them, the players that that kind of fill their roster with guys that they're interested in and want to attack. I think we'll be more effective and more efficient that way. But certainly, I mean, we recognize a lot of strides made on the field. We also see where in our conference we have to continue to elevate, and in both lines of scrimmage, to me, I commented on this, I think, after the Tennessee game in the defensive front, quality depth. I mean, you have to be able to run three lines out there, and there can't be a huge fall off in play. But what the answer can't be is trying to play someone who's 255 pounds inside, not in our league. And unfortunately, injuries created that scenario for us. And so that, yes, we're constantly looking at it. And I think, to your point, Robbie, it's, there's a little bit of adjustment period here where it's again, getting the type of lineman in, kind of, looking at who's here and how they fit the system and how they fit the coach, and where there's a need for turnover in that respect. And then identifying both in the portal and as we go, the high school linemen that fit that profile. But when you talk about the offensive line, you have to, in my opinion, be really strategic in how you invest your money, because what you know about a player who's played in college, who's maybe 2 or 3 years into their career, or sometimes 4 or 5 years into their career, there's way more known than unknown, and you're not waiting on someone to develop a year or two, which is basically, again, in the NIL world, that's money that's not on the field. We want to invest in the players that are making the plays on the field, and so the portal gives you the best opportunity to do that.
I know you talked a little bit about player retention there, but can you talk about the challenge of doing all of this while also preparing for a bowl game with Vanderbilt?
Yeah, gosh, I'm trying not to lose perspective on all that. I think this is, we haven't been to a lot of bowl games as a program in our history, and I think as I was still battling, from the Tennessee game result, I received a text from an old friend who's been a part of this program for a number of years, and just reminded me of that fact. I think it's really important for us too. We want to focus on winning this bowl game. That's important. I mean, it's a great momentum boost, but it's also, I think, historically significant. And so we've made progress regardless, but those things will be at the forefront of our mind. Now, the good thing, I guess, to your question is that we don't have an opponent yet and we don't have a location yet. So there's a lot we don't know, and so this gives us a little time and a little space to train the team, to stay kind of conditioned in our systems, but also to focus on retention and what that looks like, and again, kind of portal boards and trying to build out the best plan of attack for the next couple weeks. Come Sunday, we'll know who we're playing, we'll know where we're playing, and we'll need to narrow a focus on being the best we can be for that game. But it is certainly challenging. Positives, December being now a month where we're not on the road. I think this signing date comes quickly for us, but I think there's a positive in that too, because you have a clean break from which you can now focus on, again, the portal and the retention of your team. And I love the fact that we're not, crisscrossing the country right now. I just think that's healthy for everyone. So it'll always be hard, and part of the reason you coach is you enjoy the challenge of it.
George Corey, to get his offer, hops on a Greyhound bus on like 12 hours notice, and he said that he's playing for visa sponsorship after he's done with college. How can that mindset be a positive infusion for your program, and what do you think of him as a player?
There's just so much potential there. I mean, obviously when he camped with us, it was so clear his physical tools, and you get excited about, again, developing those tools and refining him as a player. The background and the mentality is, it's priceless in terms of what it can do to the environment of a team. And again, I would one of the things we value so much about Diego is that there's this constant sense of needing to earn it, needing to show, needing to prove it, chip on the shoulder, being doubted, and that's a similar. George carries a similar mentality, and there's not a competitive venture in the world where it's that's the mindset of people that find success. And in so many ways, I've said this before, but for those of us that are reaching for the heights, you got to be a little messed up, and part of that is just this constant feeling of needing to prove it, needing to earn it. And so I'm so excited for him to be a part of this. I think he fits perfectly in what we want in terms of that environment. And again, it'll be those mindsets that get us from where we are to where we're headed next.
Gabe Fields, I think, had some monster games in high school. What can you tell us about him?
Another guy that, we had connections with, had personal connections with in the area, immediately felt like he was a fit. When he came on his visit, it was so clear to me that this guy was, screaming Vanderbilt football. And, it's just special when the families see it the same way. We're really excited about him. I think we got to continue to build depth in that running back room. We thinned out as the year went on, and with our offensive approach, we need to be able to take the 5-yard runs and create 12-yard runs, and take 12-yard runs and create 20, and the 21s need to become 60 and for touchdowns. And Gabe's a guy that can do that. Obviously, we have guys in our roster too that'll help him, bring him along and develop him as well. But super excited about him and think he's a great fit as a person, and obviously think the world of him as a player too.
What position do you view Carson primarily playing, or maybe starting his career at, and what are the chances that he will play as a true freshman? Given, I know you haven't seen him practice with you guys yet.
Yeah, no, it's the cool thing is, we'll have a lot of time with him to help prepare him for that. And he comes from a great program too, and so there's going to be a lot that he is accustomed to with the structure and the academics and all those things that'll help him get off to a good start. I think in the world we play in now, I mean, you can't have enough of kind of like long athletic hybrid safety bodies. And, our plan with him will be to start him back and to see how he picks up and plays the game from a high safety position. And also have the ability, to play him in that star role too. Because again, I see those three spots as interchangeable. I think the further we go in developing our system, the more you're going to see the ability for, those three guys to spin around and to play either down or high based off what the call is or the formation. So that's where we see him. He does have a great frame and length, so we'll also see how he grows. But God, to have that length and that frame in positions to cover people, again, you don't have to be perfect. You cover with your length. You make windows tighter, and I think a lot of playing high safety is what is your football instinct. The balance and body control and the acceleration to close spaces. And all of that we'll see as, again, he starts with us this winter and we move into spring. But there's going to be a spot for him. He's a good football player, and it's just going to take some time to figure out exactly where that is.
How similar or different are the conversations you have with recruits even to 5 years ago? Are there any crossovers remaining, or are they just completely different?
That's a good question. It all seems to have sped up, and it all seems it feels like fewer touch points. It feels like fewer times where you're actually sitting in the living room of a player, and spending time with families. A lot of that happens on your campus, and I think too, people make decisions knowing that ultimately they're not, they're always going to have the ability to reevaluate those decisions. So it has changed a lot. We've tried to stay genuine and authentic to who we are. I mean, I don't recruit anyone based off a one-year vision. As a high school player, this is about what 3 to 5 years looks like, and I think I always, and I don't want to run the risk of sounding too old school, but I always think about it how, the kind of what I would want to see for my own children, and that's this idea that I think the self-discovery that happens in college is so critical to the maturity and development of the person. So like our players spending 3 to 5 years here, it's like you go through that development on hyperspeed. You learn how to self-evaluate, you learn how to communicate, you learn how to operate within a structure, you learn how to speak for yourself, you learn how to compete. The game teaches you a lot too. And so I just think the longer you can be somewhere, the more you get beyond surface level relationships, and people can actually speak to that within you that needs to be nurtured and grown. That's still the best possible scenario. Now, we have to look at the play performance on the field and continuously evaluate, because I do believe that the people we recruit want to play football. They want to play in the NFL, and if there's not a pathway to the field here, we need to communicate that honestly and as quickly as we can to give guys an opportunity to get somewhere where they can be nurtured and grown, but also have the experience they want to have on the football field. And I think that's where these conversations that you have with respect to, guys that go in the portal or looking for new opportunities, they don't become pure transactional. It becomes, hey, this isn't going to be the right place for you to do what you want to do. Let us help you get somewhere where you can. And all that to say, we don't approach high school recruiting with that in mind. I think you approach high school recruiting with this is why this is the perfect place for you, and here are the things that are going to be around you. And by the way, we are going to have honest conversations as we go, so let's have honest conversations in the recruitment. And that part of it, I think, is held true. It just, the context around it has shifted a little bit.
How much influence was Tim Corbin in your thinking that way? Because I feel like you guys see the recruiting world of relationships a lot the same way. I've heard portal recruiting described as speed dating. When your foundation is built on relationships and getting to know people, then you got to make snap judgments. How difficult is it to switch, and how have you figured out any shortcuts in the portal evaluation? That's a lot of stuff in one, but it's a complicated world.
It is, and I think you're starting to see some cautionary tales around, how, we look at it this year and say, let's go back to, 2022, and we come off a 5-7 year, and we're like, hey, we made a lot of progress.
Yeah.
We doubled down on our systems, and, we retained the wrong players, and we didn't do enough to retain the ones that left us, and that gave way to a 2-10 season, so you've got to scrutinize it and understand, we feel like we made some really good choices last off season that positioned us to be competitive this year. I still believe that for our program to win at the highest level, there has to be an element of environment and culture that strengthens us as the year wears on. And I think the programs that ultimately are able to withstand adversity are ones that are built on a solid foundation. Okay, and to me, the solid foundation is relationships, and maybe those relationships don't last as long as they once did, but they can always be honest and genuine and authentic. That may be the most important part. Let's not be used car salesmen in our approach. But we have to look at the opportunity we have here and say nothing's guaranteed for us to show progress from this year to next. Are we retaining the right people? Are we setting a course for guardrails and boundaries in our program too, where it's not just, hey, everybody gets whatever they want. We have to have some semblance of, this is still about plugging into something bigger than yourself. And then we have to be very surgical with the people we add. And you can do the best you can to, get a pulse on, what type of competitor, what type of character the person brings. You call coaches, you talk to people that are in their corners. But I still think even though it is speed dating, spend a day with someone and pay attention. And again, we give voice to everyone in our program that spends time with a recruit. So it could be me, it could be one of our recruiting assistants or a student intern, but what do they observe? What do they see? And as this process goes, I think more is revealed the more you pay attention. And it's just whether or not you're willing to see what you need to see. Sometimes we like to convince ourselves of something before we actually sit down with somebody. So those are all things that we try to stay disciplined around. It's very challenging. As far as Coach Corbin, talk about a guy who I came to him, I don't know if I've ever shared this before. It was after our playoff run in 2018. And so this was spring 2019. And I was burnt out. It was my first year coordinating. We had been undefeated. We had lost a really tough game in the playoffs against Clemson, and the weight of the world was bearing down on me. How am I going to repeat this performance? How am I going to be better in my role? Whatever, just you feel the pressure. And so I kind of felt, we'd gone through spring practice, and it was almost like this. I just felt uninspired. I was being hard on myself, and I was in town recruiting, and I was like, I'm going to hit up Tim and just see if he'd be okay with me coming over and being a fly on the wall. And over my career, I had always, first of all, when I was here, Coach and I would interact. I was the former baseball player that he probably didn't want on his team, so he probably kept a little bit of distance with me just to make sure I wasn't asking my way over there. I'm just kidding. But he didn't want me on the team. No, we had developed a relationship around baseball, and obviously Tim's such a good person and relatable, and so we had stayed in touch. And like when I'd come in town when I was 23 years old or 25 years old, I'd hit him up, and we'd go to Waffle House, and I'm sure you guys know the Waffle House stories, and he'd eat the same thing every time, and I'd just ask him a million questions. And there was also a connection with Don Meyer, right? And so Tim and Don were close, and Coach Meyer and I became close too because of my time in South Dakota. And that was kind of where I drew my inspiration, watching those guys, listening to them. And so when I came back in 19 to be on Fly on the Wall, I interacted with a program that was on its way to its second national championship. And I'm in the corner of the room thinking that he was just going to let me observe. And next thing I know, I'm in a receiving line of 40 whatever players, all introducing themselves to me, making eye contact, firm handshake. And I'm like, God, that's wild. About halfway through, I realized this is an exercise for them. It's like this is a part of their standard for greeting guests. And that's not important unless you make it important. He then goes on in a presentation to show pictures of players that he had in the program here standing at attention for the national anthem. Now, again, if you've ever watched our baseball team, you see the incredible detail in the way we stand. I mean, it's really remarkable, and that's not important unless you make it important. And to me, it's what are the things you're emphasizing? What is the motivation for why you're emphasizing them? And how are you ensuring that those shine through? And a baseball program is different than a football program, but I remember leaving that day after watching practice thinking, I don't know if my kids will be good enough to play college baseball, or my daughter, what her interests in, but if my kids can be a part of this program, I'm talking about Vanderbilt baseball, if they can be a part of this program, man, will they be better for the experience. And I kind of took that thought and said, it's not about me being better in my role I can't call better defenses. It's about me doubling down on the fundamental things, the foundational things that make the things important that I want important for my own kids, kind of stuff. So all that to say, Coach has set a standard for me in terms of the type of program that I want to build, and yet I'm watching him adapt and evolve too. And I think that's, to me, that's the mark of someone who's excellent, who's chasing greatness and able to still stay relevant as long as he has. He's willing to kind of reimagine this, and watching him do that and watching the success they're having now recruiting and seeing him evolve is incredible. So if he can do it, why can't I? That was long-winded, but
no, that was great.
Yeah.
You guys talk a lot about how you're changing your philosophies with the portal and these things.
We do. I mean, I any chance I get, I try to steal a dinner with he and Maggie. And usually that's me crashing wherever hey, where are you guys eating tonight? And I'll come crash, and it's a great chance for me to have a little therapy session a lot of times. But those don't happen as frequently as I'd like, just because we're both so busy. But we stay in close touch, and again, I feel lucky to share the same logo with him. It's pretty special.